We are living in a moment where some of our most foundational institutions are being questioned, undermined, and in some cases, actively dismantled. And one of the most urgent of those is education. What we teach, how we teach it, who gets access to it, and whether we still believe that facts are real and science matters and learning is worth something. Those are not small questions, and our next guests have dedicated their lives to answering them. Sal Khan is the founder of Khan Academy, which has quietly become one of the most transformative educational tools on the planet. He is also the vision steward of TED, which starting in 2027 will move its flagship TED conference right here to San Diego. And joining him in this conversation is Dr. Fabi Bagula, Superintendent for the San Diego Unified School District, making knowledge accessible to everyone. Please welcome to the stage Sal Khan and Dr. Fabi.
This is an exciting time, and I really was looking forward to getting to chat with you today in service of our students here that we represent in San Diego. So thank you.
No, honored to be here.
So the first question we have is, you've just taken on the role as vision steward and board member at TED, one of the world's most powerful platforms for ideas. What does that responsibility mean to you at this particular moment in history? And I always like to call it a chrono system. We're in a very specific chrono system in history. How does it shape the way you think about education's role in public life?
Yes, you know, I still sometimes wonder how I ended up in this vision steward role. Just a little bit of background, and this will tell you of what the vision that I'm trying to steward is. About 2 years ago, I was meeting with Chris Anderson, who has been the steward of TED for many, many years. And we were just meeting about ideas that maybe we could do together. And I kept telling Chris, you know, I think this was already an issue, but especially with AI, the biggest problems or the biggest issues of our time are going to be human purpose, human connection, and human meaning. And I said, maybe Khan Academy and TED might be able to do something together on the purpose side, on the economic opportunity. We've actually now launched this we've announced this Khan TED Institute with ETS as well to do higher education, reskilling. But at that point, it was just an idea, just kind of a glimmer in our eye. And I also told Chris, you know, it feels like TED, it already does so much. It has the flagship conference. It has TEDx's around the world. You have TED.com. And Chris really gets all the credit, or Chris and the team, for democratizing TED in that way. But I said it feels like TED could go even further in really helping us build human connection around the world. I didn't think that I was interviewing for a job. A few months later, Chris pulled what I call a Willy Wonka. He said, this was February of 2025, he said that he was about to turn 70, and that he was looking for anyone for the new role of steward of TED, which was his role. And there were hundreds of people who gave different proposals. Some were for-profit, non-profit, et cetera. And I just kept telling Chris, because I didn't think I was at all involved. I thought I was just a friend of TED. I said, Chris, no matter what you do, you know, this is how I feel about Khan Academy. There's very few organizations that I feel could be true institutions for the world, that have the trust, that have the brand, and like, don't let TED get bought by for-profit or private equity or anything like that. And at some point, Chris said, hey, Sal, I agree with you. Would you want to take on this role? Okay. There was a lot of haggling between Khan Academy's board, and I am taking a second job, but it hopefully is going to be complementary to what I'm doing at Khan Academy. But the long story short is, now that I take on this role, and then there is a CEO of TED. This has been how Chris operated too. He's the steward, and then there's a CEO, and now with me there's Logan, who's the CEO, who runs the operations of it. But I get to help set the direction, the vision of what TED is, represent TED at things like this. And yes, my intent is, can TED and potentially TED plus Khan Academy figure out how we navigate from human purpose point of view, skilling, jobs, et cetera, meaning and connection. And connection, we hope to really show it in its best form at the flagship conference, which will be here in San Diego, but then take some of that energy, that magic, and see if we can spread it to the rest of the world.
And I think one of the things that I see as superintendent is there's a lot of critique about our young people not having necessarily have the conversational skills. When I heard Ted was coming to San Diego, I thought, fantastic, because what I see is I hear the critique, but what I see is young people very engaged and wanting to share their ideas and actually pushing on ideas and even challenging the current chrono system. So I think it's going to be fabulous to have you here. So.
We're excited.
So Khan Academy has long been about democratizing access to education. When you look at where we are right now, culturally, technology, economically, what does meeting the moment mean to you as educator?
So there's two layers to it. One is we see, our mission as a nonprofit is free world-class education for anyone, anywhere. And we see that as raising the floor for folks who don't have access to much, but also raising the ceiling if ideally you do have access to a great teacher and a great classroom. On the raise the floor, just to make it tangible, we now exist in over 50 languages in almost every country in the world, over 200 million users. And just this last year, I met a young woman, and she, most of the credit goes to her, but she typifies what we're trying to do. She grew up in Kabul, couldn't go to school because of the Taliban, and actually it was Kandahar, couldn't go to school because of the Taliban, and Khan Academy was her school. Luckily she had a laptop, she had an internet connection. When she's 17 or 18 years old, she decides that she wants to come to the US and study computer science. She applies at MIT. MIT sees her application, they're fascinated by her story, but she has no SATs, ACTs, grades, transcript, nothing. And so they said, her name's Fatima, there's this other nonprofit, which we helped start, called schoolhouse.world, which you can certify your Khan Academy knowledge. So you could take, say, a calculus assessment on Khan Academy, but you record your face and screen, follow a protocol, you have to explain your reasoning out loud, and then that video gets peer reviewed, and if it all looks good, we say you're certified in calculus. So she did that in a whole series of, and it's also a platform where you can tutor other young people. So she did all of that, and then she got admitted. And I was actually able to meet her up in Northern California over this past summer. She was invited by OpenAI and Y Combinator as one of the top engineers in the US. And when my wife and I took her to a Pakistani restaurant, and she's like, yeah, Elon Musk was speaking, but I'd rather, anyway. But I was like, you should have met with Elon. But she's the example. So we have people like her, orphans in Mongolia, using Khan Academy. I met a young man who was in jail for 15 years. Khan Academy was his lifeline. He gets out, he transfers to Stanford. I mean, these are exceptional young people. But that's where I see the raising the floor. A lot of it is you're in rural Alaska. You need access to a world-class subject matter, or even some inner cities. But ideally, you do have access to amazing community, amazing teachers, facilities. But even there, and I'm sure you're aware of this, it's hard if you're one teacher in a room of 25 or 30 to meet the needs of every student individually. So we don't view, we do what we do primarily with technology, but we don't view it as technology for technology's sake. It's really, how do you scale up personalization? How do you allow the teacher to do the human aspects better while also being able to meet the needs of every student? Some of the kids are ready to move ahead. Some of the kids might need some gap filling, some remediation. And so that's where we see our role as, trying to deliver that mission.
That's really beautiful, and it made me think of a problem that I haven't been able to solve, but I think maybe we can actually discuss this a little bit further, because San Diego is very close to the Mexican border. And what I was told was by the Secretary of Education of Baja California that there's 20,000 American citizen students in Baja California that don't know how to speak Spanish. And so they don't have access to schooling right now. And I'm very concerned about that. I think what you're offering is actually a really good way of saying we can re-engage, because I've been trying to figure out how do I get them either internet hubs, or how do we do a cross-border sort of school so that they don't have interrupted schooling. Because what happens is these children are American citizens that will eventually come back, and then they won't have the schooling necessary. So anyway, I'm sorry, but you just,
no, I didn't even
really
realize that this was but I mean, now that you say it, yes, it would be amazing if, I would love to partner somehow. We set up some facilities.
Yes, please.
you know, we get, there you go. We get, because that's the other thing that we're working on. Like when you hear Fatima's story, it's great that Khan Academy existed as a resource, but it would be also great if there's ways for her to get credit, high school credits and eventually college credits. And the same is true of these students in Baja California. And frankly, there's students all throughout the US who might have failed a course, need to do credit recovery, et cetera. So I hope we can explore things like that.
Please, thank you. So as superintendent, one of the things that I was telling you actually in the back room, that I strive to get to know students. I want them to, I want to know them very closely. So I host a monthly focus group with about 50 high school students. And something they've told me consistently is that they don't want AI involved in the relational parts of being human. They've said they detest it. They've actually told me, there was one student that said, right now it's really easy to tell what's AI and what isn't. But at a certain point, we're going to crave reality so much that it's going to make us put our phones down. And I thought that was really interesting from a 16-year-old saying this. But can we play a little clip of the video, please? This is former Google CEO Eric Schmidt speaking at the University of Arizona commencement.
Last December, Time magazine selected its Person of the Year for 2025. And this time, it was the architects of artificial intelligence. Interesting. It will touch every profession, every classroom, every hospital, every laboratory, every person, and every relationship you have. I know what many of you are feeling about that. I can hear you. There is a fear.
So it was important to play that clip because that's my personal experience when I talk to students. Some of them have said they like to use it for study guides and those kinds of things, but how do you respond to that? And what constructive role can AI have in education?
Yeah, look, Eric, he's actually a former board member of ours, and he's donated, and so, I have a lot of respect for him. But I will say that I also understand what those students are feeling because, you look at someone like Eric, who's clearly going to be on the winning side of however AI evolves. He's, he owns heaven knows how much Google stock, and I worry a lot that people are talking about a K-shaped recovery in the economy. I think we might have that accelerated because of AI. You're going to have the people who are either the owners of capital or have the right skills, like even things like software engineering, which 5 years ago was a hot ticket. It's not that software engineering is going to go away. What we're seeing is the top 10 or 20% of software engineers are now getting paid like NBA stars, which might be a good thing, but the other 80% are losing their jobs. And so it's happening even more. So, that fear that these students are feeling is a legitimate one. And going back to what I think are the biggest issues of our time, I don't think industry leaders should just try to get us all excited and pump us. Trust me, it's going to be fine. I think we have to take some serious action sooner than later to help people prepare for this world that we're going into. And I wrote an op-ed in the New York Times back in December that industry should voluntarily start doing this, not even out of altruism, but out of self-interest. Because if you start seeing even 5, 10, 15% unemployment amongst college students, people who thought they were going to have an upper middle class lifestyle, the politics are going to look very, very ugly. That's just a very early canary in the coal mine of what we might see societally.
Yes, and then, so one of my favorite MIT scholars talks about how the last big technology boom was social media, and that caused more misinformation, more social isolation, and more social division. And I think, and his warning was, it's going to happen with AI even more. It's going to exacerbate that. So what can we do as a society to intervene? Because I see that as a cross-section almost between the chrono system politically and then also the technology boom. Like, is there any thoughts around that cross-section of being able to speak to each other with truth and with compassion?
Yeah, I think any technology is fundamentally neutral, but what it does is it amplifies human intent. So if you go back to fire, harnessing a fire, we didn't invent fire, but harnessing a fire, you could use, if you have negative intent, you can destroy, burn. If you have positive intent, you can preserve, you can keep warm. That's true of every technology since then. And to some degree, that's probably true of AI. And yes, there is going to be either amplification of negative intent, fraud, deepfakes, misinformation, surveillance in bad ways. There might be unintended consequences of the technology, human isolation. Obviously in education, people are talking about kids just cheating on ChatGPT, cognitive offloading. But what I tell everyone is, that doesn't mean that the technology is fundamentally bad. If anything, if you run away from it, you're pretty much ceding the technology to these bad or these not great outcomes. So, everything that I just described, like say in the education space, instead of cognitive offloading, you can actually use this technology to do more cognitive onloading. So yes, if I tell a student to do their homework and they go to ChatGPT, they're not going to learn. But if what used to be a multiple choice question can now be, hey student, can you explain your reasoning? Can you draw something? Wait, why did you say that choice? Now all of a sudden it becomes a much, much higher order thing to be doing with AI. Similarly, if people are just in their rooms and their new best friend is their AI, and that in doses, I've gotten some good advice. I'll say one story that my daughter, she's 14 now, when she was 13, she's always picked on her little brother who's 11. I have a 17-year-old too, but she's always been a little bit mean. He always wants to be around her.
That's kind of normal.
It's normal. And then all of a sudden, I see, and my wife and I was like, be kind to Azad. He's, never works. And then all of a sudden I see she's being kind to him, and she's even including him when her friends come over. I was like, when I got her alone, I was like, Thea, what happened? She's like, well, I've been journaling with ChatGPT. I didn't know this was happening. I'm a bad parent. And I was complaining about Azad, and the AI told me that, look, you're only going to be living at home for another 3 or 4 years. He's your little brother. You're really going to reminisce about these times. Like, why don't you include him? And by the way, she prompted it to talk in Gen Z slang. So it's like, hey girl, he's your little bro. But it really worked. So in small doses, now if my daughter started isolating herself and didn't have good friendships, I would start getting very worried about that. But in small doses, and in that way, I've actually done it to even, having tough situations at work. And if you're the boss, you can't confide in many people. You can't, what should I do about this? Well, you can maybe get a little bit of that here. But what I hope is that we can also use, just as we could use technology and AI for cognitive onloading, I think we could also use it to foster human connection. The same Schoolhouse.World, we started it during the pandemic as a way for people to tutor each other. So yes, it is using Zoom, it is online, it is using technology, but they are forming connections across boundaries. We just started a program on Schoolhouse, and we did this because a lot of the universities asked us to, where students fill out surveys, high school students, on all the hardest issues, the things we're afraid to bring up at dinner parties. Israel, Palestine, affirmative action, gun control, just go down the list. And we pair the students from around the world with kids with opposite viewpoints. And they meet on Zoom, and it's recorded for safety, et cetera. And they're not meant to debate, but they're meant to hear each other out and have a dialogue. And at the end of it, they give each other feedback. Did I feel heard? Was there any aha moments, et cetera? And if you see what has happened there, we've run about 7,000 of these sessions so far. It will give you hope for humanity. And every one of these, students talk about that this is a human connection that they couldn't find available in their own communities. Either they're in a bubble or everyone's afraid to bring up these things. But by giving this form, and technology was the way that we could reduce some of those frictions. And so going back to the first question about TED, I hope we can also explore things like that where at scale, we can maybe leverage technology, but not for technology's sake, but ways to connect people to each other, ideally in person in your local community. But if you don't have that, maybe there's ways to connect you across communities.
Yes, and I love what you said about amplification of intent. I think I'm going to use that next time I talk to the high school students. And I'll admit just to you that I asked my ChatGPT to talk to me in Clive Owen's voice. But that's just... I won't tell my husband that. Well, at San Diego Unified, we've been investing in something called Teach for the Moment. And it's an initiative that centers curiosity, not as a soft skill, but as a civic one. I was really getting tired of hearing fake news as kind of a way to shut conversation down. So I thought, well, what's the behavior that I'd like to foster? And it's curiosity. So I always say, stay curious. Do you see curiosity as the connective tissue between science, literacy, and democracy? And how can AI actually support that, or does it undermine it?
Well, curiosity is one of the super important aspects here. And to what we just talked about, I think it could either undermine it or it could really support it. People who are truly curious right now, like, you were there, and Tom Friedman's the next speaker, we were all behind. I've been geeking out with, every AI I can find on what's going on in the Middle East, just to understand what's going on. And every now and then, Claude will say, well, would you like to track where the tankers are? I said, yes, please. And would you like to see what if they're setting up a medevac in this place, because if they're actually going to invade Karg Island, they would have to do this first. I was like, oh, I didn't realize. And so if you're curious and if you're asking the right questions, it's like having a genie in a bottle now. Now, on the other hand, if you're not curious, if you're checked out, and you just say, give me the answer, it's going to be the exact opposite thing. So I think as educators, and as employers, and as just society, we have to figure out ways to make sure people build these meta skills. Tom was talking about backstage that if you're educated, you can do amazing things with these things. You have to be curious enough, and sometimes you have to call BS on it too. Because I remember even when I was talking to it, it's like, well, it might, we might go after Karg Island before crossing the strait. And I said, wait, but don't you have to cross the strait to get to Karg? Oh yeah, you're right. You got me. The AI. So you have to have you have to be engaged here. And Tom was saying the same thing, that if you just ask, and I don't want to steal his thunder, but like if you just ask it to write an op-ed, it'll write a mediocre op-ed. But if you say, hey, I have some novel ideas here, and I'm curious about this and how that connects, now all of a sudden it can be a really powerful thought partner.
And that's something that I see. So as superintendent, and just in general, actually as an educator, when I visit kindergarten classrooms or even first grade, second grade classrooms, the kids are super curious about everything. They want to know about how the world works. And at a certain point, that's gone. And I've actually talked to both principals and my teachers, and I've said, there's something that, and I'm going to take responsibility, there's something that our public education system does that quiets that voice. And I just am trying to amplify it the most possible. Any insight on how we maintain that curiosity alive in public ed?
Yeah, well, first of all, 100% agree with you. Like, you cannot find a 4 or 5 or 6-year-old who will literally not cry if you don't let them explore something, or if you don't let them try something out. I think what happens is oftentimes we start penalizing experimentation. There's a lot in education, we talk about the power of growth mindset. And growth mindset is, hey, failure is not a bad thing. It's actually when you learn the most, versus a fixed mindset where it's like, I'm either smart or I'm not, I'm either curious or I'm not. But the reality is, even though we preach growth mindset, we do explicitly or implicitly tell a student, you're a C student, and you'll always be a C student, or, maybe not for you. And, hey, don't bother me with that question. And, hey, I'm going to take away your agency right now. Just do what you're told. And, that some level of docility maybe is okay to function in society, but I think we've overdone it. I mean, it worked well for the industrial age, but I think that's where a lot of that curiosity has gone. I don't think this was someone was cynical and just trying to, but it's easier to have a population that's docile than one that's curious. Like, wait, why does that make sense? Wait, I know we've been doing that for 200 years, but can't we do this in a different way? So my best view, we have a lab school where my kids attend, and my oldest is now going to be a senior, so he's been there for 12 years. And what we've done is we try to give the kids much more agency. We allow them to do a lot more personalization, and we free up a lot of the day for them to do their explorations. The teachers, who love their jobs, I think, more than a lot of standard teachers, they don't view themselves as the source of all knowledge. You have to do this second, that second, but they view them as being mentors, guides, helping the kids go in the right direction. And I think I don't want to jinx it, but we're consistently seeing, especially even in high school, where kids can get very stressed out, et cetera, they're less stressed, they're more curious, they're learning for learning's sake. We do mastery learning, which is, hey, if you have a C level right now, learn from that and have another shot at goal next week. Get it to a B, get it to an A, instead of me just promoting you and hoping for the best that that C doesn't undermine you in the future.
I love it. One of the things that I got a lot of, I'm not going to call it pushback, but a lot of confusion when the state of California said they're going to limit cell phone usage at schools. I took that policy, and my board was asking me, like, when are you going to implement it? They were very much like, when are you going to implement this? And I said, well, I'm going to take it to the students first. They're the ones that might be penalized, to your point. I'm like, they're the ones that are going to get in trouble for a tool that we all use, and I don't want them to get in trouble. So I want them to understand all of the research. And they came up with some great ways, including they asked me to send home newsletters to parents with certain articles about how that impacts brain development so they can talk at the dinner table. And that's the power when you give authority, like I'm going to say agency to students. They come up with some really great ideas. So I appreciate that you mentioned the penalization of things.
Well, and I think this is really powerful because I see two extremes going on here. One is we're just going to take it away from them. And that in no way is teaching. And look, I think cell phones in the classroom, fine, take that away. We take that away from our. But if you don't allow them to build their own agents, their own self-regulation, then the day they leave, they're not going to be able to take themselves off of it. It's probably I also see binge drinking on college campuses. All of a sudden you couldn't do it, and then now all of a sudden it's unregulated. And obviously there's a lot of talk about screen time and AI, and AI and all of this. And I worry that when the pendulum goes too far, you're not giving some level of thoughtful moderation. Of course, makes sense, but we should also be giving students the ability to come up with their own. And there's another extreme too. I won't name names, but there's a very tech-focused school in Texas that's been getting a lot of buzz, and they use the AI in the other extreme, where the AI is just making sure that the kid is on task all the time. Okay. That also I don't think is good, because what a thoughtful person would do, like what I would do with my own kids, is exactly what I would try to do, which is, hey, how do you feel right now? How much more time do you need? Do you really need another 20 minutes on that? Or don't you have some things to do? Let them build that metacognition, as opposed to saying, hey, I'm your dad, you have to stop this right now. I mean, you have to do a little bit of that. But you have to stop this right now. If you do that too much, they're not going to have their own self-regulation.
Agreed. My favorite part, by the way, of giving them the legislation to read and reading it together is they found the loophole. So they immediately said, hey, it says right here, if the teacher allows it, we can use it. And I was like, that's what's called a loophole. So it was a really good conversation. So if innovation is accelerating faster than our social norms or our institutions, and sometimes even our ethics, what must we protect fiercely? What responsibilities do educational leaders hold right now if we want to develop not only skilled students, but thoughtful citizens and good humans?
It's what you said earlier, which is the most important skills. You mentioned curiosity. We talked about listening. We talked about these very human, backstage we were also talking about these very human skills are truly going to be the skills that I think are the most durable. I don't know what's going to happen to software engineering. I don't know what's going to happen to copyright editing. I don't know what's going to happen to call centers. But someone who can persuade, someone who can support, I think there will be plenty of jobs for them. We'll really value that in an AI world, or whatever we call it. And one of the main arguments why you want to go to a physical school setting is that we say, oh, you'll develop those social skills, you'll develop those interpersonal skills. But right now, it's not explicitly developed. Nowhere on students' transcript do you say, oh, Fabi's a great speaker, Fabi's a great listener. She's like, oh, Fabi looks like she's great at calculus, but we don't know if she can teach, And the same thing is true in higher education. You could look at someone from Harvard or Stanford with a high GPA, you still don't know. Are they the team member that you want? Are they the person that you want to go through hard times with, et cetera, et cetera? And so one of the things that we're developing this higher ed institution called the Kahn Institute, and even though the first degrees we're going to offer are going to be Bachelor of Sciences and Master of Sciences in Applied AI, we see the heart of these degrees is building these very human skills. So things like that dialogues program that I talked about that Schoolhouse is doing, peer-to-peer tutoring, putting people together and putting them into a real-world simulation where not only do they have to come up with some type of an interesting output, maybe using AI or not, but they also have to give each other feedback on, most of us graduate from even grad school not ever having to give someone in-person feedback, which is still one of the hardest things I do in my job, having a hard conversation, taking feedback, things like that. But people who are good at that, salesmanship, whatever you want to call it, I think those are going to be the skills that not only give you economic purpose in the future, but those are also the very real human skills. I met a professor at Stanford who teaches negotiation to engineers. But he views negotiation as a very broad thing. He's like, no, but it's also negotiating with yourself. It's negotiating with your friends. It's negotiating with your partner on how these pieces we don't have. And, there used to be pieces of this that would happen in religion. And obviously still a lot of people go to their churches and synagogues and temples and mosques. But as we become a more secular society, and sometimes people have drifted away from those things, I do think, and I hope that Ted and all of us, we can explore this, are there ways that we can give some pieces back where we can form close communities in person, ideally, but even virtually, and we can start thinking in more elevated ways, where we're not just thinking about, where the stock market is or how we're going to save for retirement, but why are we here? What does it mean to be a human? What is this universe that we're in?
Yes, that's beautiful. That's one of the things I've been talking to teachers when they're asking me about AI. I say use it for the technical aspects so it can give you more time for the relational pieces with students, but thank you. Right now we're speaking to leaders here in San Diego, people with real power to shape what happens next and beyond. If you could ask one thing of this room, what would it be?
Oh, well, I'm very, very excited, and the entire TED team is super excited about us coming here, and we want and genuinely want this, and especially me, a lot of my time I'm thinking about education, and so I definitely want to work with you in particular in San Diego Unified and think about doing something.
Yes, I'm going to clap for that too. Thank you.
So that for sure, but also in my interest, you said that she substitute teaches, which first superintendent that I met does it, and I think that's wonderful because it keeps her close, keeps her close to students. And I feel the same. I don't want TED to be viewed as just an elite thing that shows up and these people fly in from around the world and then we leave. I want everyone in San Diego to feel like, oh, that's the week that TED is here. Yes. When I really hope that we can do things with the school system, with the community. I think the TED speakers, as a former TED speaker, I would have loved to meet kids in the local community and talk to them and do salons with them. I remember when I was a kid in New Orleans, I was born and raised in New Orleans, only when I left did I realize that Mardi Gras was not as big of a deal as Christmas in the rest of the world. And I hope that we can have that same thing in San Diego. Oh, it's TED Week, this is the week that we do interesting things.
Okay. We'll host. We have plenty of spaces.
Yes, sounds good.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I think that concludes our time. Thank you.